Me and the Elite Zone have not lost betting on MMA for 11 weeks straight. And in this video, I'm going to tell you how we're going to do it for 12 weeks. From the very first fight of the night, all the way up until the main event, I'm going to give you my full card betting breakdown and predictions for every single fight on the card. Welcome to the lucrative MMA betting show. This week, we are in Las Vegas, Nevada, yet again, where we have the battle of the welterweights. Gabriel Bonfim taking on Randy Rude Boy Brown in a main event matchup, which is practically a grappler versus striker. In those fights, we often get finishes, so let's see how that one plays out. We've also got a bit of a flyweight banger, with flyweight veteran Matt Schnell taking on Joseph Morales. Ricky Simón is on the card, battling a fellow veteran, Raoni, Barcelos, in a great bantamweight matchup. Ismael Bonfim, the brother of the main eventer, Gabriel Bonfim, is also on the card, and he's taking on Padilla. One of the best prospects, in my opinion, in the middleweight division in Marco Tulio is taking on Christian Leroy Duncan, and I'm going to speak to you about every single one of those fights, as well as all the other fights on the card. Boys, I cannot wait to it. So let's run the intro, and I'll see you on the other side for some bets and breakdowns. So welcome back, guys, to another edition of the lucrative MMA betting show. We have been crushing the sportsbooks for the entire year. Currently, I'm up 177 units profit. If you don't know what that is, it basically means a ton of money. I'm currently recording this show a couple of days before Steve Garcia takes on David Onama. So over a week in advance. So I don't know how that card went for us, but we have won for the last 11 weeks straight at the time of recording. Boys, me and my VIP, the Elite Zone, have not lost an MMA betting weekend for 11 weeks. Not one loss. This is not a normal run. This is a very abnormal run. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about the entire sports betting planet. I am friends with top sports bettors in Vegas and throughout the world. And let me tell you something now. Winning 11 weeks straight is not normal, right? It's actually insane. If we can do 12 weeks in a row, it is going to be 3 months without even one loss. I am so locked in at the moment in order to achieve that goal. My second goal is going to be cashing 200 units of profit on the year. So 2 goals, boys. 12 weeks without a loss for me and all my VIP, and then also reaching 200 units of profit for me and all my VIP. So I know we can do it. That's why you're seeing 200 units written on all of my comment sections. Let's effing do it, lads. We're going to do it before the end of the year. And we're going to start with the main event, and we're going to go all the way down the card. First things first, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. It helps me, motivates me to make these videos every single week for you. So let's get into the main event. We have Gabriel Bonfim, and he is taking on Randy Rude Boy Brown. Gabriel Bonfim coming into this fight with a shiny record, 18 wins, 1 loss. Randy Brown, on the other hand, 20 wins and 6 losses. Currently, they have Gabriel Bonfim as the minus 170 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Randy Brown coming back at plus 145. So first thing to mention for this one, boys, as I mentioned in the intro, is that Gabriel Bonfim is on this card with his brother, Ismael Bonfim, right? They're the Bonfim brothers. They often fight on the same cards as each other, and it's very good for them because they're in similar weight classes, lightweight and welterweight respectively. So they're always training together. They're sparring each other. They're training hard, and they're always going into a fight camp and a fight night locked in together. So I'm sure that helps them very much, because they have someone that's not only their friend, but a blood brother that helps them prepare. So I'm sure that's going to be a big boost in both of their corners every time they fight. He's taking on Randy Brown, who's a veteran at the UFC at this point. Randy Brown, very long, very tall guy, very lanky guy, very rangy guy, very good boxing, good cardio, decent jiu-jitsu. He's just good and well-rounded everywhere. I wouldn't say that Randy Brown has like a massive flaw in his game, right? I wouldn't pinpoint one area and say, this guy's so bad at this. All you need to do is this to beat him. Even some of the best fighters in the world had like a glaring weakness, like Khabib. His glaring weakness was the striking. Conor McGregor was the wrestling. I feel like Randy Brown's a pretty good fighter everywhere, whereas his opponent, Gabriel Bonfim, is a specialist in one area, and that is the jiu-jitsu, that is the grappling. Not even so much the wrestling, but mainly the grappling. We know that Gabriel Bonfim is a very good jiu-jitsu practitioner, and even when he doesn't get a submission, he's oftentimes putting you in submissions, or at least coming close and dominating you from grappling positions. We saw it in his very last fight. He fought Stephen Thompson in that fight, right? A veteran of the UFC, just like Randy Brown is. And in the very first round, he had Stephen Thompson in the choke. It was pretty close. I had bet on Stephen Thompson in that fight. So I was sweating buckets when he took him down, when he got into dominant positions in the grappling, but he wasn't able to submit the veteran of Stephen Thompson. In my opinion, he clearly lost the fight after that point. He got head kicked in the later rounds. He got hurt badly, and he was lucky to get a split decision robbery, in my opinion, awarded to him. Me and everyone in the VIP had a big bet on Stephen Thompson there at gigantic odds. And look, boys, maybe I'm being biased. Please let me know in the comments what you thought. Because I did bet on Stephen, so maybe I'm biased because I bet on him, but I thought he clearly won that fight, and he was a massive underdog. So it's very upsetting when you have a great bet on a big underdog and he still loses. But that's part of the game. That's part of MMA variance, and we all have to take our licks in this game. But like I said, Gabriel Bonfim, even though he won that fight and didn't get the submission, he was still close to a submission, or at least he had a submission attempt, right? And he's always very good in round one, Gabriel Bonfim. We see this throughout the entirety of his career. Very good in round one, but slows down as the fight goes into the later rounds. We saw it in his lone loss against Nicholas Dolby. He capitulated in that fight. He got out cardioed, he gassed out, and he got finished. I believe we saw it in the Ange Lusa fight. I don't think he looked as good as the fight went into later rounds there. Now, he still dominated the fight for the most part. Pretty good jab. He was showing his boxing off there. I just don't think he was as explosive as he was in the first round in the later rounds. And then same thing goes again with Stephen Thompson. He clearly won round one. He almost dominated that round, and he clearly lost, in my opinion, the fight after that. So, yeah, this guy slows down. He can't be trusted after round one, but maybe his gas tank issues are overblown a little bit because he has won decisions. He did beat Chaos Williams almost into round three. It was a late round two stoppage there. Like I said, he did beat Ange Lusa via decision, So I'm not saying this guy's, and he did beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson via decision. It was still a close fight in general, even though he did gas out. So, I'm not saying the guy just completely falls off a cliff and dies, but I definitely give Randy Brown the cardio advantage here, and a pretty big cardio advantage as well. Now, I've had a look on Gabriel Bonfim's Instagram and some other places, and I can't see any footage or photos of him training specifically for someone like Randy Brown, which I think is a negative. Maybe he has been doing it and there's just no photos and videos of it. But in this Instagram age, me being an MMA bettor, I do research on these guys, and 9 times out of 10, if they got a specific training partner or something like that, it is on Instagram or it is on YouTube or it is on Twitter, or you will find it somewhere, or there's an interview, someone talking about it. I couldn't find any evidence of Gabriel Bonfim training with a tall, lanky striker. That's probably a negative. He definitely should be getting those rounds in because Randy Brown definitely presents a unique challenge, being the much taller fighter, being unusually tall for the welterweight division and unusually rangy. But maybe he is getting in, like I said. Look, he has gone up against tall fighters before. Manir Luzez, Trey Waters, these guys are tall, rangy, and he did run through those guys, right? So I'm not saying it's going to be, a massive challenge for him, but it is still a unique style that you don't see often in MMA. It's a very interesting fight for me. Like, I'm picking Gabriel Bonfim to win round one, and I'd pick Gabriel Bonfim to win round one against 90% of the division. I really would, because he's very good in round one, right? What's more interesting is what happens after round one. Like if he doesn't submit Randy Brown, and to be honest, I don't think he's going to, right? So I'm going to say he doesn't get his submission, his patented submission win against Randy Brown. I don't think he's going to do it. So if we look at his win, loss, and draw ratio together right now, we can see that a massive 72% of his wins come via submission. 72%. Comparatively to a decision, that's only 11% of his wins. So the guy has 18 wins, and 13 of them have come via submission. So if he doesn't get the submission, you have to start questioning how he's going to do and if he's going to win the fight. And I personally think that Randy Brown's good enough on the ground to avoid the submission. Do I think it's impossible? Of course not. He's got 72% of wins via submission. I'm going to call that he doesn't get a submission and that we see the fight play out a little bit more. I don't know what the total is going to be set out because it's not out at the moment, but I might be looking to an over 1.5 or maybe even over 2.5 if they give me some decent odds there. Because I do feel like Bonfim will win round one with wrestling and grappling, but I think round two and round three, Randy Brown may be able to stop the wrestling and grappling. I think we could see a rerun to some degree of the Bryan Battle fight, where Bryan Battle is clinching Randy Brown up against the cage, trying to take his long-range weapons away, but then he's losing from long range when the fight is at long range with 1-2s down the middle, teeps to the stomach. And that's kind of how I see the fight playing out. I see it being a very close fight. I see it probably going to a decision more times than not. That's why I might look for an over bet or a GTD bet, goes to a decision, something like that. And I honestly feel like the fight could play out similar to the Bryan Battle fight. Yeah, I'm going to go with Gabriel Bonfim because I'm picking him to win round one, and then he only needs to win one out of the next 2 rounds to win the fight. And I don't think Randy Brown is a great finishing threat because he doesn't put the pace and pressure on fighters. He likes to fight on the outside. And I feel like Gabriel Bonfim, you want to make him tired. You want to make him cardio dump. And I don't think Randy Brown has the style to do it. I still think Randy Brown's going to win 1 or even 2 of the later rounds, though. I could definitely see a Randy Brown win here. So I'm not confident in saying that Bonfim will win. But I am going to pick him as an outright prediction for the outright pick, guys. And as I always say, who I'm picking does not correlate with who I'm betting. If you want to know who I'm betting, you have to hit the link below and join my elite zone. And then you're going to get all of my official bets and exactly how much money to place on them. Like I said, boys, this is a pick and prediction and breakdown show. It is not a bet show where I tell you all of my bets. That is different. Please bear that in mind, because sometimes I get comments like, oh, you picked this guy. That was a terrible pick. What a bad week for you. And I'm like, no, we just won 12 units and all of my subscribers have loads of money this week because we didn't bet on who I picked on a breakdown show. So it's very different, boys. Of course, you can still use it and it will help you massively to craft your own bets. But like I said, if you want my exact bets, the link is down below. But I will be picking Gabriel Bonfim to win this fight, and I will be picking him to win the fight via decision. I feel like those odds could be pretty good, boys, so we'll see when it comes out. The next fight on the card is Matt Schnell taking on Joseph Morales. Matt Schnell coming into this fight with a record of 17 wins, 9 losses. Joseph Morales, on the other hand, in his second stint in the UFC, sitting at 13 wins and only 2 losses. Joseph Morales is sitting as the -235 favorite with the underdog price tag on Matt Schnell coming back at +200. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it, that Joseph Morales only has 2 losses on his record, but he was already cut from the UFC, as I mentioned when I showed you the tail of the tape. This guy's in his second stint in the UFC now, and that's something to note, right? So this guy's already been there, done that in the UFC, got cut from the UFC, and now found his way back into the UFC. I honestly feel that when the UFC re-signs you, you're a solid fighter. I always take a step back and I look at it and go, all right, there's a reason why you got cut in the first place. But typically, when you're cut from the UFC, you don't make it back, man. You really don't, right? If you make it back, there's something semi-special about you. You've changed your game. You've made it back. And unless it's like a short notice fill-in spot and that's why they bring you back, I have to step back and go, all right, I'm going to have to give this guy a little bit more respect now. You think of Kyle Dorcas, you know, who left the UFC, was cut from the UFC, and then he got signed back. And then he had a brutal knockout as a +250 underdog in his first fight, right? You think of Yusuf Salau, you know, who was cut and now he's coming back, and, you know, Yusuf Salau might fight for the title soon, right? And you think of Joseph Morales, you know, this guy in the UFC a couple of years ago, I believe it was back in 2018. He didn't look like the best fighter of all time. We will get into that stint, but now he's back. There's a reason he's back. He's proved himself to be worth being back. The reason he got into the UFC, you know, back again, is because he fought on The Ultimate Fighter. So he went on The Ultimate Fighter. He won The Ultimate Fighter with a very impressive win against Alibi Idris. And I'm probably saying that one wrong, I'm sorry. In The Ultimate Fighter finale, which was on the Dricus Duplessis and Hamzat Chimaev card in Chicago. I was actually there live for that fight. I was there live in the arena to watch that card. It was the same night where I went out with Carlos Prates and all of his team, and we partied throughout the entire night. So it was a very special night for me. It was a special card as well, because that card was pretty solid card. It was the 2 spinning back elbow cards where Carlos Prates got a spinning back knockout, and then it was also where Lerone Murphy got a spinning back elbow against Aaron Pico, and Prates was a spinning back elbow as well. So it was a great card. I got to watch the entire card. Obviously, I was there early. And I also watched that fight, right? And I was extremely impressed with the performance of Morales in that fight. I mean, he dominated as a +350 underdog. The fight wasn't competitive. The fight wasn't close. And one thing I'll say about Morales is that his grappling is really, you know, where he does his best work. So if you watch Morales tape and you study him, you will find that a lot of the commentators, even on the regional scene, they will herald his grappling. They will say that he's a wrestling coach and he's a grappling coach. And you can see that in his fights. So Morales trains at Team Alpha Male, which are known for their wrestlers and known for their smaller fighters, the bantamweights, the flyweights. So it's a good training camp for him. Even though I don't think they're as prominent as they was maybe 5-6 years ago, they still have a lot of shorter guys which are good at wrestling. So that's a great camp for him. As I said, he is actually a wrestling coach. So not only is he good at wrestling, he actually coaches wrestling. Sometimes I feel like that's a big benefit, because I've heard coaches speak about this, where you have to think of the game differently when you're a coach versus when you're a fighter. And I guess it's the same with MMA analysts and people that make their full-time income betting on MMA as well. And fighters have said this to me. They're like, you know, I can't bet on the fights to save my life. How the hell do you bet on it? Because you're not even a pro MMA fighter, but I am. And a lot of high up MMA fighters have asked me that, you know. And sometimes I feel like when you're looking at it from an outside perspective, you think of things differently. So I definitely think that's a benefit for Morales. He is a coach at Elk Grove Wrestling Academy. And I think that could be the tail of the fight here. Because if we look at his opponent, Matt Schnell's career, we see that Matt Schnell gives up takedowns for his entire UFC career. You know, even in his last fight against Jimmy Flick, that wasn't a good look in my opinion. Matt Schnell was a big favorite in that fight, and he almost threw the fight away by just getting taken down and controlled and grappled by someone like Jimmy Flick, who in my opinion probably isn't on the same level as wrestling at all as Joseph Morales. Is he a better grappler? Maybe, arguable. I don't know. He's a bit more dangerous, I'd say. I don't think he's a better grappler though. So I don't see why Joseph Morales can't go out there and do the same game plan that Jimmy Flick did, but instead of gassing out like Jimmy Flick is known for, just do the same thing for all 3 rounds. Or even get a finish, because at the end of the day, Matt Schnell is not immune to finishes. Matt Schnell gets finished in almost every single one of his losses. Like, let's be real, he gets knocked out on the feet or he gets submitted. He's been submitted multiple times by front chokes, you know, specifically. So I think Matt Schnell can be knocked out on the feet. He can be submitted on the ground. And I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen in this fight. Yes, Joseph Morales was cut from the UFC, but if we take a look back at that actual stint, he lost against Davison Figueiredo, who was ranked 14 at the time of their fight. And to be honest, that wasn't like an uncompetitive matchup. Now, Figueiredo finished him in round 2 with a knockout, clearly beat him in both rounds. Like, he was obviously looking like a big favorite, but Morales didn't quit. He wasn't a pussy. He never backed down. At times, he was walking Figueiredo down. He was landing shots even after being hurt on the feet. And one thing of note, Figueiredo took him down in that fight with pure physicality. And that was really the big difference in that fight. It wasn't necessarily skills. It was just like Davison Figueiredo was like, basically he looked like a middleweight compared to Morales. Not looked like it, but the way they physically matched up, Morales was just so outmatched. You know, Figueiredo just touch him once and he'd wobble, or just throw him on the floor. Like, Morales try to wrestle him and they'd just push him off like, you're just way weaker than me, you know? And that's what Figueiredo done all the way up until the title shot and the title fight and the title defenses, really. But in round 1, Davison Figueiredo had top control for a lot of the time. And to be honest, he couldn't pass Morales' guard. Morales is very active with his guard. We saw it in his fight against Idris. He almost choked him out from top position in round 1, you know, was able to pass guard, put him in a arm triangle and then took the back, did fall off the back. And I have seen him fall off the back multiple times throughout his career in most of his fights. You go back and look at the Ultimate Fighter fight against Emmanuel Rodriguez. You know, he falls off the back there. I've seen him fall off the back in his second UFC debut against Idris. So, you know, that is an issue. But when he falls off the back, he has a decent triangle choke. And like I said, he's very good from guard. He was able to stall out Davison Figueiredo from guard, so much so that the referee actually stood them up because Figueiredo wasn't passing guard, wasn't doing any damage. That's how good his guard was. And this was 2018. You're talking 7 years ago. You know, he's way better now. 7 years ago, he's a 24-year-old kid. You know, he's a 31-year-old man now. So it's a very big difference, in my opinion. He's always had a good guard. And we saw that in his fight against Idris, where he choked him out of a triangle choke. So I wouldn't be surprised when Morales takes Matt Schnell's back from being a much better wrestler, was able to take him down, take his back, falls off the back, but triangle chokes him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to guillotine him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to rear naked choke him. You know, I don't think he'd knock him down, knock him out on the feet, but Matt Schnell does not have a good chin. So honestly, a high kick knockout, it definitely could happen. I mean, crazy things happen in MMA. Look at Quillan Salkild against Nasrat Haqparast the other day. One of the most random and craziest outcomes ever. I mean, Nasrat Haqparast was obviously going into that fight the better striker, great durability. He even blocked the kick. Yes, the kick he didn't block the whole thing, but he had his hand up. Like, mad shit happens in MMA. And if you've got a bad chin, Morales does throw good kicks. It is flyweight. Like, he can get his kick up there pretty easy. So I wouldn't be surprised with a knockout, but I'm much more predicting a submission. So I'm predicting Joseph Morales to make a statement in this fight, to get a finish in this fight. I'm predicting him pretty confidently here. And I may end up with a bet on him depending on the odds, depending on if I prefer a prop bet. Like, maybe I'll go with inside the distance or submission over the money line if there's more value on the submission. I don't know, whatever. I'll decide. As always, if you're in my VIP, my elite zone, you're going to get all of my bets a bit closer to the fight. I still haven't decided, but I definitely have decided on this, that I'm picking Joseph Morales to win this fight. In the next fight of the night, we have Muslim Salikhov taking on Uros Medic. So Muslim Salikhov coming into this fight with an extensive MMA record of 22 wins, 5 losses. Uros Medic, on the other hand, only 11 wins and 3 losses. In this banger of a contest, Uros Medic is sitting at minus 200 odds, with the underdog price tag on Muslim Salikhov coming back at plus 170. This is a very interesting fight for me, guys. I think someone's going down. I think someone's going down early. I looked at the under 1.5 rounds here. I looked at the doesn't go to decision. I looked at the ends KO. Someone's getting knocked out, in my opinion, in this fight. I mean, it's the same tail of the tape in almost every single Muslim Salikhov and Uros Medic fight. It's like they got big power. They can hurt anybody, but they get hurt all the time as well. Let's take a look back at some of Uros Medic's recent fights. So in his last fight against Gilbert Urbina, within the first few moments, that guy was dropped on his ass with a big shot. And then he landed a knockout very, very soon after that. In his fight against Semmelsberger, he got dropped multiple times. Something I want to mention about this one as well, boys, is that Uros Medic was dropped multiple times in his fights by the right hand. You know, he got dropped with Semmelsberger twice by the right hand. He got dropped by Soriano with a right hook. That's what started it off. And then Gilbert Urbina did the same. So I wouldn't be surprised if Muslim Salikhov pulls out his right hook here. He's got a good right straight, good right hook in general. And yeah, I could see that shot specifically landing. Like I said, on the other hand, we have Muslim Salikhov, who I don't think has a good chin. He's aging now. He's getting very old. 41 years of age. Like I said with a couple of fighters before, you know, he's not going to be doing this thing at 43, 44. You know, he's just not. Now, if it's like a low-pace fight, then he can land his counters. Carlos Leal made it a crazy pace, and he still landed his counter, right? But that was early into the fight. It was like one of the first shots he threw. It was the perfect shot. It is what it is. But if the fight gets a little bit gritty, high-paced fight, he doesn't do well in those type of fights. He lost against Nicholas Dalby in that type of fight. He did beat Santiago Ponzinibbio, but he was tired in that fight. Like, if the fight goes late, this guy's going to gas out almost every single fight. Doesn't mean he can't win, but he's still going to gas out. Uros Medic has better cardio, in my opinion. I don't think he has the best cardio of all time, but I think he has better cardio, and you have to favor Uros if the fight goes like over 1.5 rounds. You kind of have to favor Uros Medic, you know. I could see Salikhov. The thing about Salikhov, he likes time to breathe, right? So he'll burst, he'll throw some cool shots, spinning kicks. I mean, spinning will kick knockouts he has in his career, even in his recent career. So, you know, if you give him space and time to work, he's extremely good. But if you pressure him, yes, he has some slick counters and you got to be careful. But, you know, as the minutes wear on, the guy's going to get tired and sometimes fall off a cliff. And on top of that, even in a low-pace fight, like, you can still knock him out with one punch. See what Randy Brown did to him, you know, see what Leech Jing Liang did to him. One thing I want to mention about this fight is that Salikhov is training now just for the 4th time in a row. So, you know, at age 39, 40, he moved his camp to pound-for-pound Muay Thai. And he has really good training partners there. And he's actually seen some resurgence since being at that camp. He's training with Neil Magny, Drew Dobar, and he has a good camp over there. I feel like we've seen improvements out of him. I'm not going to say we're going to continue to see big improvements. He is 41, but it is worth mentioning. Whereas Uros Medic is over there, I believe in Alaska, training over there. Not the highest level of training partners compared to someone like Muslim Salikhov. So, yeah, it's a very tough one for me to call. I mean, this is an easy fight. Doesn't go to a decision spot. Maybe I bang that in a parlay. Maybe I play the under 1.5 rounds, like I said. I'm going to go with Muslim Salikhov to get the win, just because he's got better wins, more UFC experience, way more MMA experience in general. Uros Medic is getting dropped by everyone, you know, even Gilbert Urbina and Matthew Semmelsberger, which probably aren't on his level, still dropping him. Whereas, you know, when Muslim gets dropped and knocked out, it's not really by fighters that are not on his level. You're talking about Leech Jing Liang and Randy Brown. Like, they're higher level than Matthew Semmelsberger and Gilbert Urbina. You know what I mean? I feel like Muslim Salikhov has fought at a much higher level and competed, and he is a much higher level in general than Uros Medic. He has way more extensive kickboxing, Muay Thai, Sander background, and I think he's a better striker in general and better at picking his spots than Uros Medic. Thing is, Uros Medic is younger. I don't know if he has a better chin, probably not, but it's probably close, but he is younger, and he hits just as hard. And at the end of the day, two fighters with heavy hands and poor chins, that's just a volatile matchup anyway. Even if one fighter's a lot better, he could still lose because of the volatility of the chin. But I will pick Muslim Salikhov for those reasons I just mentioned. I will pick him via knockout in round 1. And I'd say he gets his 3rd knockout in a row in round 1, which is, you know, kind of crazy at his age. Like I said, picks are not bets. I'm well aware that Uros Medic could just get a 1st-round knockout here, but I am going to pick Muslim Salikhov in this fight. The next fight on the card is Ismael Bonfim, the brother of the main event headliner Gabriel Bonfim, and he is taking on Chris Padilla. Ismael Bonfim coming into this fight with a shiny record like his brother, a lot of wins, 20 wins, with 5 losses. Chris Padilla, on the other hand, semi-similar record at 16 wins and 6 losses. Ismael Bonfim is sitting as the -200 favorite with the underdog price tag on Chris Padilla coming back at +170. So boys, first thing to mention here, as I always try and do, give you as much information as possible. This fight is only made on a week's notice, right? Ismael Bonfim wanted to be on the same card as his brother, so they have called in Chris Padilla and they made this fight on very short notice. Now I'm assuming that Ismael Bonfim would have been more in camp, training, not necessarily harder, but at least he knew that he would most likely be fighting on this card. And I can't say the same for Chris Padilla. At the end of the day, sometimes that doesn't matter. Like I said, Quillen Salkeld didn't know he was going to be on the card until 10 days out. Nasrat Haqparast was training for that card for months, and he got knocked out with one of the probably the most brutal knockout I've ever seen. That was definitely like a random outcome, but I'm just saying, it doesn't always matter in MMA, but it is still a piece of the information, right? Ismael Bonfim's been training in fight camp with his brother consistently for hopes to be on this card, and now he is on this card. This is a very tough fight to call, guys. One thing I want to say is, like, I don't have a great read on Chris Padilla fights, you know? And I feel like it's weird because he's definitely does a good job at setting up a lot of his strikes. He's pretty dangerous. And what I mean by that is, you know, he can take you back, he can choke you out, he can land big shots on the feet. I don't think he's the greatest finisher, but I think he's a little bit dangerous and sneaky with his setups. Now, the reason I say I don't have a good read on him is because he seems to win a lot of these fights where I think that he's not going to win, or he's looking like he's going to lose, or he's not looking that good, but he still manages to pull out the win. Jai Herbert in his last fight, that's a great example of that. I mean, it was a close fight. You know, I didn't think he looked that impressive. He ends up getting a split decision win there. So well done to him. In his fight against Rong Zhu, you know, I don't think he looks that impressive, but he did win round 1 on the judges' scorecards. But I felt like Rong Zhu was like clearly winning that fight, taking over, and then he lands a spinning elbow, which finishes him. Sorry, not a spinning elbow, just an elbow, which finishes him. So it's like, he's pulling out the wins even in fights where I'm thinking he's not looking that great. So maybe he's just a good winner, man. Maybe he's just a good winner. I mean, he's got 16 wins, so he definitely is a good winner. Ismael Bonfim, on the other hand, I feel like I got a bit of a better read on him. Like, I can read his style a little bit better. I don't think he's that dangerous where he's going to land elbows and cut you open and doctor stoppage you, or take you back and choke you out really quickly and slickly. So I feel like it's easier to read that type of fighter because, he kind of does the same thing every time. He doesn't really have a get out of jail free card in where he's going to land a crazy knockout. I know he did that against Terrence McKinney, but Terrence McKinney is that type of fighter. Like, he either highlights you or you highlight him. So I feel like I have a better read on Bonfim. And I just read this fight to be very close, man. I'm going to go with Chris Padilla. I haven't got a long breakdown for you guys. Some fights I go in depth on, some I don't. And I'm not going to go in depth on this one. I just feel like Chris Padilla is going to be the one landing the better shots. I could see him cutting Bonfim open. I feel like his work to the judges will look a little bit more spectacular. I expect Bonfim to throw some good boxing combinations. I expect Bonfim to out-volume him. But I expect Chris to stay on the back foot, maybe throw some good knees, throw some good kicks, some good elbows in close. And I think it's going to be a close fight. But I also believe that Bonfim is more likely to be finished in this one, I think. I give Chris Padilla more finishing upside. I think he could take his back and maybe land a rear naked choke. I think he could potentially land a big shot. I mean, at the end of the day, he got a doctor stoppage 2 fights ago, and Bonfim has already been doctor stoppaged in his last fight against Nazim Salikhov in a fight that he was winning. So I'm not predicting a doctor stoppage, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility with the way Chris throws those elbows. They can cut you open. As we know, elbows cut you open more than any other shot. Knees and elbows, but elbows are easier to land. More often you're going to get an elbow to someone's face than a knee because you've got to bring the knee high. So yeah, I'm going to predict Chris Padilla in this one, probably via decision. But like I said, he does have more finishing upside. So yeah, it's not a confident breakdown, but I'm going to see the odds and I'm going to see what I want to do. But yeah, Chris Padilla is the pick for me. The next fight on the card is Ricky Simón taking on Raoni Barcelos in one of the highest level fights on the entire fight card. We got Ricky Simón coming into this fight with a record of 22 wins and 6 losses. Raoni Barcelos, on the other hand, a very similar record of 20 wins and 5 losses. Semi-surprisingly, Ricky Simón is the moderate favourite in this contest at minus 155 odds, with the underdog price tag on Raoni Barcelos coming back at plus 135. This is a great fight, boys. Battle of the veterans, battle of the aging bantamweights. It's crazy because none of these guys are ranked at bantamweight, and they're not even necessarily that close to it, but they're both very good fighters, very high-level fighters, very hard to beat. And we've seen that in their recent fights. I mean, Raoni Barcelos beat Peyton Talbot not long ago. Peyton Talbot, as you all know, my favorite fighter, one of the best fighters in MMA today, in my opinion. But he lost against Barcelos. Barcelos also beat Garbrandt, beat him up, ran through him to some degree. I know Garbrandt's not the highest level of fighter, but it still says a lot about him. Ricky Simón, on the other hand, finishing and beating prospects like Javid Basharat. Like, these guys are very good, man. And it's going to be an interesting fight. I'm going to be interested to see the approach of these two fighters. Like, is Barcelos going to push the grappling? Because he has been pushing the grappling a lot more in his recent career, a lot more. Because I remember, coming up, not even coming up, just, a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I would always say to myself, like, Barcelos needs to shoot the wrestling, needs to shoot takedowns, needs to shoot grappling. A lot of times he just like to outstrike his opponents. And he didn't push the wrestling or the grappling as much as he necessarily should, because he's a very high-level grappler, very good black belt. I believe that he might even be a coral belt, or it's his trainer or his father who is a coral belt. To get a coral belt, you basically have to be a black belt for like 20, 30 years or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it's something along those lines. So the guy comes from a lineage of high-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners, and you can see it in his fights. I don't think he's the highest-level jiu-jitsu player in the bantamweight or the UFC at all, to be honest, but I definitely think he's very good at jiu-jitsu. So I'm interested to see if Ricky pushes his wrestling, because Ricky is a high-level wrestler for MMA, and Barcelos is a high-level grappler, jiu-jitsu player. So how is that going to play out? You know, usually the wrestler's able to take him down and stay safe and dictate where the fight takes place. So I side with the wrestler. But sometimes the grappler is, you know, so slick that if you're going to play into their world and take them down, you're going to get your back taken and submitted. Exactly like what happened with Mateus Gamrot versus Charles Oliveira. Gamrot gets to decide where the fight takes place for the most part, but Charles is just way too slick for him, man, and was able to finish him there. So, yeah, I'm interested to see if Ricky pushes the wrestling here like he does in every fight. I think it would be smart to push the wrestling. I don't think Barcelos is a Charles Oliveira type. I don't think Barcelos is going to be able to choke him out. In my opinion, Ricky's going to be able to stay safe, get the takedowns, but he might not even come out there shooting takedowns, right? I don't know his game plan. I am not the coach. If I was the coach, I'd tell him to push the takedowns. Not crazy. You don't want to be an idiot and put yourself in the line of fire, but definitely mix in the takedowns as you usually do. You know, Ricky Simón has like a Marab type game plan to some degree. You know, he's like a Marab, but he just doesn't do as much because nobody does as much as Marab. But he throws a lot of strikes, not as much strikes on the feet, but he shoots a lot of takedowns. I mean, Ricky sometimes shoots 10, 15 takedowns per fight, you know, which is very high level amount of takedowns. I think that if he does that here, he's going to be smart because Barcelos is aging. I don't think his cardio has ever been that great. I definitely think it's deteriorating massively. Maybe we haven't seen it in some fights lately, but I feel like it is. And I think Ricky has the big cardio advantage. Despite him gassing out a little bit in his last fight against Cameron Smotherman, I still believe Ricky to have a pretty big cardio advantage, especially if they start grappling and wrestling, because Ricky's just way more used to that grinding wrestling type game plan than Barcelos is. Like I said, for a lot of his career, he just preferred to strike. And I kind of feel like that was because he knows he gets a little bit tired grappling. And people are going to say in the comments that, no, he doesn't. He shot 15 against Peyton or whatever, and he's grappled all these fighters recently. He doesn't have bad cardio. I'm not saying he has bad cardio. I just think he has worse cardio than people believe. And I also believe that, especially if there's resistance, and I also believe, and this is the main thing, that Ricky has a big cardio advantage. So maybe I'm not saying he has bad cardio, Barcelos, but in this matchup, I think he has the worst cardio. He has the bad cardio, right? So yeah, I like Ricky to go out there and shoot takedowns. And even on the feet, man, I think Ricky can crack Barcelos. I don't think this is going to be a popular pick. I think a lot of people are going to be on Barcelos. But I'm going to take the other side here. I'm going to pick Ricky Simón. I think Ricky Simón can hurt and actually finish Barcelos on the feet with big overhands. We saw what he did to Javid Basharat. Me and everybody in Elite Zone bet on him against Javid Basharat as a massive underdog, and I feel like he can do something similar here. Now, I'm not saying he's going to one-shot Barcelos, but Barcelos has been hurt in almost every single one of his recent contests. Almost every single one. You know, Garbrandt was clocking him before he started to take over that fight. Peyton Talbot wasn't able to get his game off, but he still landed some big shots there, and Barcelos, I feel like, did very well to push through, but I still feel like he got his bell rung a couple of times in that contest. In the Cristian Quiñonez fight, he got rocked badly. That was a bad one, you know, and he did end up getting the finish, but at the end of the day, man, he was on his way to losing that fight, you know, against a fighter who is nowhere near the level of Raoni Barcelos, and he was able to get the submission in round 3, but like I said, he was on his way to losing that fight. In the Kyler Phillips fight, he got hurt, he got rocked, so I feel like this guy's chin is not great. I think it's deteriorating. I think the gas tank's deteriorating. He's 38 years old now at bantamweight. He ain't going to be doing this thing at 40, you know. Any day now, the wheels are going to start falling off. And Ricky Simón is 33. And although people look at Ricky Simón and believe that he's a bit washed, I actually think Raoni Barcelos is the one who is more washed. So, look, boys, I gave a long breakdown for that one. I gave a semi-passionate breakdown. It doesn't mean that this is the best bet on the entire card. You know, I'm more confident in Joseph Morales winning than I am with Ricky Simón, to be honest. But I do feel like it deserves a passionate breakdown because I believe I'm going against most of the market and most of what the MMA bettors will land on in this spot. I could be wrong. I haven't watched anyone else's breakdowns because they don't exist. We're the first to market with our breakdowns. But I know MMA, I know bettors, I know people who look at the sport, and I'm pretty sure they're going to side with Barcelos more often than not. I think this pick's not going to be a necessarily popular one, and those are the picks I love. So yeah, Ricky Simón is going to win this fight, in my opinion. That's my pick, and I might even be picking him to get a finish. I think is extremely live here. So Simón for the win for me. The next fight on the card, we have Marco Tulio taking on Christian Leroy Duncan. Tulio coming into this fight, very shiny record, 14 wins, 1 loss. CLD, Christian Leroy Duncan, has a record of 12 wins and 2 losses. So this is Brazil versus England. Marco Tulio is currently sitting at the slight to moderate favourite at minus 145 odds, with the underdog price tag on Christian Leroy Duncan coming back at plus 125. This is a great matchup. Two flashy strikers. Two strikers who like to spin, and two strikers with big knockout power in the middleweight division. You know, Tulio is one of my favorite prospects in the division. I think he's the real deal. And I think this is going to be a great matchup because Christian Leroy Duncan, I'm not necessarily going to come out right and say he's the real deal, but I do think he's a very good fighter. I think he's a lot better now since he lost to Gregory Rodriguez and Armen Petrosian. I feel like he's improved a little bit. But he hasn't fought great fighters after that, so we don't truly know, right? And I don't think the Pulev fight was like the best look of all time up until like the last 30 seconds where he almost finished him. This is a very interesting fight, boys. You know, I feel like it's going to be a little bit more lower paced than a lot of fighters or a lot of Tulio fights have been. CLD has very good footwork, stays on the outside, very tough guy. He can definitely lure Marco Tulio into a bit more of a low-paced fight than he's used to. You know, Tulio kind of just walks forward into range and throws loads of strikes. I mean, landed 127 significant strikes in a fight that finished against Trayshawn Gore in his last fight. So very high level, right? And he's a shoot box guy. You know, he goes out there, he throws a bunch of strikes, even at middleweight. And he has sometimes some disregard for his own health or disregard for his own chin. But he is very, very good offensively, so he can do that to most opponents. I do think he needs to be careful because, you know, throwing caution to the wind and being very offensive against someone like Christian Leroy Duncan can leave you in a position to get spinning elbowed or a big knee, because Christian Leroy Duncan is extremely athletic and will time those fancy shots. So, you know, the shoot box prospect Marco Tulio does have to be careful with that traditional shoot box style, especially because a lot of those shoot box fighters are bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, and the consequences for getting cracked on the chin is a lot lower than it is at middleweight, which has a high finish rate. Speaking of throwing caution to the wind and being offensive, Marco Tulio broke his hand in his last fight, and there's no wonder, because this guy's just throwing a million shots. Like I said, 127 significant strikes in that fight. He broke his hand in that fight, and I did manage to find some photos online of him in a cast, so that's not great, but it seems like he's been training and his hand's been a lot better for multiple months now, because there is, on his Instagram, there is photos and videos of him hitting pads like quite a while ago, multiple months ago. So I'm sure he's going to come into this okay, but it's just something worth mentioning. This is an intriguing matchup for me, boys. I'm going to go with Marco Tulio. You know, I think that his ceiling is a lot higher than Christian Leroy Duncan. I've seen him put on better performances in the octagon. I've been a little bit disappointed with some of CLD's fights against Gregory Rodriguez, against Armen Petrosian, where he didn't really do much. You know, he kind of just got jabbed and low kicked on his way to a decision loss. That was a poor look in my opinion. The Pulev fight, I don't think was a great look either. Maybe Pulev was a little bit underrated there because Christian Leroy Duncan was minus 600. I just feel like Tulio is a lot more vicious. I think that his striking game works a bit more at this level, you know, this offensive striking. Like I said, he needs to be careful. He could get hit with a big shot, but yeah, I like Tulio in this one. I feel like he might have some grappling upside as well. I don't think he has great takedowns, but I just feel like he's going to have more takedown opportunities and more grappling upside than Christian Leroy Duncan, who doesn't shoot that often, who I don't think has great wrestling either. Marco Tulio has been in Vegas for a while. He was actually cornering Norma Dumont last week. So, you know, I feel like he's going to be ready, acclimatized to this, and I think he's going to get the win. I don't think it's going to be a domination. It's very hard to dominate Christian Leroy Duncan, but I will pick Marco Tulio to get the win in this one. Boys, there is no Wheel of Fortune today because I have to record this on short notice. I have a flight in a couple of hours. Long story short, boys, I'm going to do something a bit different and a bit special for everybody. I am giving the next 50 people that join my service a 50% coupon code. The biggest discount I've ever done, 50%, and I'm giving it to the next 50 people. These spots will go super fast. There's going to be over 20,000 views on this video. So the 50 spots are going to go extremely fast. All you need to do is go to my website, which is sublaunch.com/lucrativemma, and enter the discount code DISCOUNT50. It's going to give you 50% off for an entire month or a week if you want to just join for a week for the Lucrative MMA Elite Zone, which is where you get all of my official bets, not just picks and predictions, but my official bets, which is how you really make money. And also, I'm going to tell you how much money to place on each bet. because that's just as important as the bets you're making. You need to know how much money to place on them, because if you bankroll, manage, and stake incorrectly, you're going to lose over the long term. So you get all of that. You also get my long shot parlays and my long shot prop bets and my full card breakdowns with bets at the end of the week after I've done all my tape, and a lot more goodies. My VIP group chat where you can speak to me directly in the chat, as well as all of the other gamblers in there. So sublaunch.com/lucrativemma and use the discount code DISCOUNT50 and you're going to get 50% off. Make sure you leave a good comment down below, because next week will signal the return of the Wheel of Fortune, because I'll be situated. I won't have an early flight. And I'm going to pick one person who leaves a good comment down below to get 1 month free of the lucrative MMA Elite Zone. But we're skipping it this week, boys. I'll make sure, though, that I add everyone's comment from last week as well as this week to next week's draw. So, yeah, I'll see you on the inside, boys. Let's keep cashing on the Elite Zone. 12 weeks in a row, we're going to get it done. In the next fight on the card, we have Jamall Emmers taking on Hyder Amil. Jamall Emmers coming into this fight with a record of 21 wins and 8 losses. Hyder Amil, on the other hand, 11 wins with only 1 loss, and that was in his last fight to Jose Delgado. And this one's almost a straight pick'em, guys. Hyder Amil sitting at -115 with the underdog price tag barely on Jamall Emmers coming back at -105. I mean, boys, isn't this Jamall Emmers versus Nate Landwehr part 2? You know, not to say the result's going to be like that, but Hyder Amil is the new Nate Landwehr to me, man. I mean, this guy is a crazy MFer, you know. He walks forward into range, and sometimes he puts himself, well, every time he puts himself in bad danger, but sometimes it really bites him on the arse, like in his last fight where he got brutally finished inside the first minute of that fight. One thing I want to mention about that fight is that Hyder Amil has come on Instagram post-fight, and he has written this, which you can see right here. And he basically goes into heavy detail about that fight. He mentions in the lead up to the fight that the 8 months prior, he lost his dog, his father, and his closest friend. Like, they all died. He also said he got in a bad car accident before it happened. Rest in peace to everybody he mentions in that post. There's a lot of different people there. One thing I want to say after reading this is I share some similar sentiments around this time. And life is finite, guys. So make sure you love your neighbor. Love via neighbor. Make sure you lead with love. Make sure you're positive. Don't be negative. Everyone's out here just trying to do their best for the most part. And just make sure you cherish your loved ones and make the most of this gift that God has given us, which is the gift of life. I just wanted to put that in there. We'll get back to the breakdowns now. But the reason I showed you this Hyder Amil post is because there's a lot of stuff going on in his life before that fight. Did it affect the fight? I don't know. At the end of the day, he usually fights like a hurricane. His name is the Hurricane. And if you're a hurricane, you can get caught by a big knee up the middle, especially by someone like Jose Delgado, right? So I'm not going to say that it did cause the loss or didn't cause the loss, but it's, again, as I always say, it's more information that you can use in your own capping if you don't want to sign up to my service and get my official bets. I think that it's going to be a very tough fight for Hyder Amil early, because I don't expect him to do anything outside of walk forward into range. Maybe he changes his style now coming off a brutal knockout, first loss of his entire career. But for the most part, I feel like he only knows one way, which is forward. And I don't think it's going to be easy early, because Jamall Emmers hits very hard early, good straight shots, but he can be broken. You know, as the fight wears on, he can be broken. And I kind of feel like Hyder Amil is the new breed. Jamall Emmers is on his way out. Hyder Amil is on his way up. And I think he's going to bounce back in this fight. I think he's going to take Jamall's shots early. I think he might even get hurt. But at the end of the day, man, the more this fight turns sloppy, not even sloppy, the more this fight turns into a dog fight, the more this fight turns into a hurricane type fight. The Hyder Amil basically brings on everyone. Hyder just gets stronger and stronger in that fight. And I think Jamall Emmers gets worse and worse, as we've seen in his career, specifically the Nate Landwehr fight, even though that didn't go too long, it was only going one way if it did extend, right? So I think Amil's going to get in some trouble here, but I expect that he's going to be the one coming out on top. I actually predict him to get a finish in this fight. Hyder Amil is my pick. In the next fight on the card, we have Adrian Yanez taking on Cristian Quiñonez. Adrian Yanez coming into this fight with a record of 17 wins, 6 losses. Cristian Quiñonez, on the other hand, 18 wins and 5 losses. Adrian Yanez is favored in this contest at -200 odds, with the underdog price tag on Cristian Quiñonez coming back at +170. So this is an interesting fight to me, guys. I mean, both guys are pretty similar in that they're good boxers. They have good boxing combinations. You know, they're both going to do a similar thing in there. I'm finding it hard to call this one cleanly. Adrian Yanez has not lived up to some of the hype he had when he first came into the UFC, but he's still very good at landing his hard shots. You know, he does it to almost everybody. He has got good wins on his record, like Davey Grant. He has had very competitive fights, like Daniel Marcos, who's a good fighter. He finished Randy Costa. That was a brutal fight. Randy Costa, not the best fighter of all time, but pretty good in round 1, and it showed in that fight. He was jabbing him up badly. Adrian Yanez doesn't have great head movement. That's what I don't like. We saw that in the Costa fight. We saw that in a lot of fights, to be honest, the Marcos fight. And he can be out-volumed, and you can kind of like keep the pace and pressure on him. He sometimes gets out of his own rhythm. But once he can start to get in his own flow and warm up after round 1, he starts to really land some big shots. Good body puncher. He's got some cheeky head kicks as well. I feel like Quiñonez is going to compete in this fight. I feel like they're both going to do well. But I trust the Yanez durability more. Although I think his striking defense might be a little bit worse. I don't know. I'll have to really look into tape for that one, to be honest. But I trust that Yanez's durability. I trust his will to win a little bit. I trust his cardio. And I trust his power a little bit more. So I'm going to go with Adrian Yanez in this fight. He moved to Brandon Moreno's camp for his last fight. But he had to leave the camp because he got injured, which is not great. But, I think he's healed up now and he's ready for this fight. He looks good in his Instagram post, in his recent post. He looks strong. He looks physical. So, yeah, I'm expecting him to get this one done on durability, on power, on pace, on pressure, on will to win, on boxing combinations, on cardio as we go late, like that type of stuff. But I don't think it's going to be an uncompetitive matchup, especially early. I think Quiñonez could even win parts of the fight. So, yeah, I'll look at the odds and I'll make a decision. But at the moment, I'm picking Adrian Yanez to get this one done. In the next fight on the card, we have Mayra Bueno Silva taking on Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Mayra Bueno Silva coming into this fight with a record of 10 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw. Jacqueline Cavalcanti, on the other hand, 9 wins with only the 1 lone loss. Jacqueline Cavalcanti sitting at a big favorite, minus 255 odds, with the underdog price tag on Mayra Bueno Silva at plus 215. Interesting fight here, guys. It seems like one fighter is on a big career trajectory downslide and one fighter is on a big career trajectory uptrend. Obviously, we have Cavalcanti making waves in the UFC now, undefeated in the UFC, whereas we have Mayra Bueno Silva. She fought for the title against Rocky Pennington, lost that fight. Coming off that win previous to Holly Holm, which was overturned for a banned substance that she tested positive for. She was top of the world at that point, fighting for the title. But after I lost to Rocky, she then got beat by Macy Chiasson, doctor stoppage, very unlucky. And then she got beat by Jasmine Jasudavicius, and we know how good Jasmine is. She's also 34 years old now. Cavalcanti, on the other hand, 28, just reaching her peak. So, yeah, one fighter's at the top of the hill, fighting for the belt. Now dropping down, and we have Cavalcanti, gunning for that belt. It's just, where are they now? Like, has Bueno Silva dropped down enough to where Cavalcanti has surpassed her? Or even though she's dropping down, is she still above her? I tend to feel like Cavalcanti is clearly a better fighter than Mayra Bueno Silva, or at least, how they match up in the octagon. Because you can be a better fighter but still lose a fight because maybe you got a bad chin and your opponent has bricks for hands, even though you're a much better fighter. One thing I want to say about Mayra Bueno Silva, talking about her age and career trajectory, is that she was a bantamweight fighter, fought for the bantamweight belt, the vacant title, etc. Then she dropped down in her last fight to fight Jasmine Jasudavicius at 125 pounds. And now after one fight at 125, she moves back to 135. I don't really like that when you see fighters jumping up and down weight classes. It kind of just signals to me that they just want to take the fight for money. They'll fight anyone. They don't really care about making a run. They may be in the last stage of their career. Reminds me of Jessica Andrade a little bit when she's always moving up and down weight class. It's not a knock on them. They're beasts. They fight anyone. They don't care, right? But it just doesn't signal to me someone who's fully locked in, who with a massive goal to be champion at one weight class, cuts weight all the time. You know what I mean? Whereas Cavalcanti, she's gunning for the title. I noticed on Mayra Bueno Silva's Instagram that she got a black belt only 1 week ago. So shout out to her. It was a very good emotional video. She started crying. So, shout out to her. She's at a great stage of her career. Black belt, still very dangerous. And I'm going to say, man, that Cavalcanti at times puts herself in some bad positions in the grappling. And I do feel like that Mayra Bueno Silva is the better grappler here. So Mayra Bueno Silva via submission is always like a good prop to bet because she's so dangerous. And almost once every fight, she has a ninja choke locked in at one point, right? Not to say she finishes it that often, but she's very dangerous from bottom position, and she can sweep you and end up on top. And like I said, good ninja choke if you put your head in the wrong place, etc. Outside of that, though, Cavalcanti should win this fight all day. She's a much cleaner striker, good long-range weapons, great 1-2, good kicks. I just see her outstriking Mayra Bueno Silva in this fight, maybe even staying safe on top at some point and just clearly winning the fight via decision. Cavalcanti is very hard to beat via decision because she does throw out a lot of volume. She's a good striker, good boxer, good 1-2s, very tight, good defense. Like, it's not easy to beat her. And at the end of the day, Mayra Bueno Silva was never a fighter that was good at winning minutes. She was always good at winning moments. And I just feel like if she doesn't get the moment, she's going to lose. And I have to predict her not to get the moment at women's bantamweight against Cavalcanti, who's only lost once, and that was a decision, So, yeah, I'm picking Cavalcanti via decision in this fight. In the next fight on the card, we have Josh Hokit, the guy who went viral after his Contender Series win post-fight interview, taking on Max Gimenis.
Josh Hokit is a massive favourite, sitting at minus 400, with the underdog price tag on Max Gimenis coming back at plus 330.
So boys, this is a very weird fight. So when I was doing my research for this, I couldn't find any true tape on Max Gimenis. I found a bunch of his fights on his Instagram, and that's really about it, man. It's crowd footage, it's poor footage, there's not really much going on. So it's hard for me to make a real prediction when I haven't really seen much tape of him. I can't predict how good he is. I know that he used to train all the time with Alexander Romanov, but I don't think that's the case anymore. So yeah, I'm gonna try and do my best to get real tape on this guy. And I'm going to do more research, and then I'll be able to break it down for you in depth. Right now, I'm going to pick Hokit easily. To me, from what I've seen, he seems better everywhere. So I feel like Hokit's going to finish him inside the first round. But like I said, I'll do a proper breakdown probably a little bit later in the week, or if you're in my VIP, you'll get my real breakdown once I've seen a little bit more tape on this one. Currently, I'll pick Hokit to get the win. The next fight on the card is Tecia Pennington taking on Denise Gomes. Tecia Pennington has an extensive MMA record. She's a UFC veteran at this point of 15 wins, 7 losses. Denise Gomes, on the other hand, 11 wins and 3 losses.
Denise Gomes is currently sitting at minus 200 with the underdog price tag on Tecia Pennington coming back at plus 170.
Yeah, interesting fight, boys. We have the aging veteran who's been there, done it, taking on, the up-and-coming prospect. The issue is, I don't think Denise Gomes is like that high level. I feel like Tecia Pennington, when it's all said and done, will have the more storied and credited and better career. That's what I believe, right? But they're not fighting in their primes. They're fighting when Pennington is on the way out and she's on the downslide, and Gomes is on the way up to some degree. Gomes is partners with Carol Hosa, who is also in the UFC. And I believe that he just opened the gym recently, so I don't know how much time went into that. You can see here on Instagram that, they're talking about the gym being almost ready to be opened. That was 2 weeks ago. I know it takes a lot of effort to open up a gym, but I'm sure she's going to be ready for this fight. It's a big fight for her career, to be honest, because it's a step up in competition. She's fighting someone who is a big name in the division to some degree. And if she can get a win, especially a finish, then she's going to be right up there, for a big fight next. I don't think she's going to finish Tecia Pennington. Like I said, Tecia's quite high level. I know she's getting older, but she's still a good fighter, in my opinion. She still throws a lot of volume. I expect her to be throwing more volume here, and it could offset the rhythm and pace of Gomes a little bit. At the end of the day, though, man, Gomes is more physical. She's stronger. She's younger. She hits way harder. She has more finishing upside by far, so I have to pick Gomes. I don't know. I feel like she's going to be like minus 250, minus 300, maybe, minus 220, and it just doesn't intrigue me at those prices. I'll see the price. If it's a good price, then yeah, maybe I'll bet it. At the end of the day, I'm a bettor. This is a betting show. But for an official prediction, I'll take Denise Gomes to win this one. In the next fight on the card, we have Robert Valentin taking on Jackson McVeigh. Robert Valentin coming into this fight with a record of 10 wins, 6 losses. Jackson McVeigh, on the other hand, 6 wins with only 1 loss, which was in his UFC debut in his last fight to Bruno Ferreira.
Currently, they have Robert Valentin sitting as a slight to moderate favourite, minus 150 odds, with the underdog price tag on Jackson McVeigh coming back at plus 130.
So Robert Valentin is on a 3-fight losing streak in the UFC, so his job's on the line here. If he loses this one, he's probably going to get cut. Lucky for him, I think he's got a good stylistic matchup. Jackson McVeigh was a bit of a wild card coming into the UFC. We didn't know how good he was because he had a lot of wins, a lot of finishes, and he looked pretty dynamic, like he could be a little bit of a dangerous fighter in a division. Now, he'd made a debut against a tough fighter in Bruno Ferreira. It's not easy to make your debut against that guy, but there was an aura of Jackson McVeigh potentially being a fraud. And I don't say that to be disrespectful. It's a term that we use in the MMA gambling community. What I mean by that is it's not as advertised, right? Jackson McVeigh was advertised to be this fight. He's going to finish you in the first round. He was coming into that fight all finishes, all first round finishes, I believe, in pro MMA. He had a lot of finishes in amateur MMA, but he hadn't fought good competition. So what's going to happen when he takes the step up? And we saw what happened. He got armbarred in round 1, belly down armbar. I don't like armbar losses in men's MMA at the UFC level. I think it's pretty bad. It's interesting because if we go back and look at one of the other fighters who was a good level that he fought in his amateur career, Wes Schultz also armbarred him, So I kind of feel like Jackson McVeigh is maybe not UFC level. Now, I do feel like Jackson McVeigh is dangerous and he could probably beat not anyone. He could beat a lot of people just with his dangerousness. He could just get a guillotine or a triangle choke or something like that. Maybe somewhat similar to Zach Reese because he's pretty explosive and dangerous early. But I feel like Valentin's the better all-round fighter. I think he's got better grappling. And at the end of the day, Jackson McVeigh wins all his fights via grappling. So if it's a grappler versus grappler, I'm going to pick the better grappler. So I'm picking Robert Valentin here. I think he's going to get an inside the distance win, most likely a submission win. So Robert Valentin gets the W. My official prediction. So boys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and remember what I said. For the next 50 people that sign up on the discount code DISCOUNT50 to my website, sublaunch.com/lucrativemma, you get 50% off. So massive discount. Never done one this big before. Congratulations if you get in. You're going to start cashing big with me. But that's it, boys. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I will see you in the next one. Let's cash out yet again.